Ambassador Zethkar stretched his massive reptilian frame as his warship dropped out of hyperspace near a small blue planet. His scaled fingers drummed against the command chair as he studied the tactical display. Earth hung before him like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. This would be conquest number 18 for the mighty hegemony, and judging by his initial scans, it would be laughably easy. The alien diplomat had spent 3 centuries bringing inferior species to heel. Some begged, some fought. All eventually knelt before hegemony might. His ship's sensors painted a picture of pathetic primitiveness below, chemical rockets that barely reached their own moon, radio waves carrying their crude entertainment across space, nuclear weapons that could barely crack a moon's surface. Most amusing of all, they were still divided into hundreds of separate nations, constantly bickering among themselves. Zethkar's forked tongue flicked out in what passed for laughter among his people. These humans couldn't even unite their own world, yet they thought they could resist a galactic empire that spanned thousands of star systems. His previous conquests had at least achieved planetary unity before venturing into space. The Velnari had possessed energy shields. The Korthak had developed plasma weapons. Even the simple Grex had managed basic faster-than-light travel. But these humans? They were still using fossil fuels and metal projectiles. Their most advanced spacecraft moved slower than his personal shuttle. Zethkar had seen more threatening civilizations in his academy textbooks. What the arrogant ambassador failed to notice were the subtle signs scattered throughout the solar system. Those primitive, deep space telescopes had been tracking his vessel since it passed the orbit of Neptune. Every movement, every energy signature, every communication burst was being recorded and analyzed by systems far more sophisticated than anything in his databases. Deep beneath the lunar surface, Commander Park stood in a control room that officially didn't exist. Banks of quantum computers hummed quietly as they processed incoming data streams. The facility had been operational for 47 years, part of a global network that monitored the galaxy's shipping lanes and communication channels. Park's weathered face remained calm as he watched the alien vessel approach, but his mind raced through decades of preparation. Dr. Kim looked up from her analysis station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that would have amazed any hegemony scientist. "Commander, we're getting detailed scans of their propulsion system. Their technology is exactly what we expected based on our intercepts from the Rigel sector." Park nodded slowly. Humanity had been listening to galactic chatter for longer than most civilizations realized. Every conquest, every trade negotiation, every military deployment had been cataloged and studied. They knew about the hegemony's standard operating procedures, their weapons capabilities, and most importantly, their weaknesses. Across Earth's hidden network, encrypted quantum communications flashed between installations that existed in places no satellite could detect. Mountain bases carved from solid rock, ocean floor facilities powered by geothermal vents, orbital platforms cloaked behind advanced stealth technology, borrowed and improved from a dozen different alien designs. The message was simple, but carried weight that would have terrified Zethkar if he'd known about it. Contact confirmed. Phase 1 protocols now active. All stations report readiness status. Within minutes, responses flooded back from every continent and beyond. The facade that humanity had maintained for decades was about to be tested. Every obsolete rocket launch, every primitive radio broadcast, every seemingly backward step had been carefully orchestrated to maintain the illusion of a species barely capable of leaving their own atmosphere. Zethkar activated his ship's communication array and began broadcasting on all human frequencies. His universal translator converted his words into dozens of Earth languages simultaneously. The message was standard, refined through centuries of successful conquests. Primitive inhabitants of the third planet, I am Ambassador Zethkar of the Galactic Hegemony. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our empire. You will surrender all military assets, dissolve your governments, and prepare for processing. Compliance will result in your survival as a servant species. Resistance will result in complete extermination. He paused, savoring the moment. This was always his favorite part. The silence that followed as inferior species realized their helplessness. You have exactly 72 hours to broadcast your unconditional surrender. Any attempt to flee your system or hide will be considered an act of aggression. Your primitive weapons and divided nations cannot stand against the might of the hegemony. Zethkar leaned back in his command throne, already composing his victory report. The humans would probably spend their remaining time in panic. Some would try to evacuate their cities. Others would launch their pathetic missiles in a final act of defiance. A few might even attempt to negotiate for better terms. He had seen it all before. The pattern never changed. Fear, desperation, and finally submission. His weapon systems could glass their entire planet in less than an hour. His shields could deflect anything their primitive technology could produce. This conquest would be over before his morning meal. The ambassador's confidence was absolute. After all, what could these backward humans possibly do against the most powerful military force in the galaxy? In installations across Earth and beyond, that question was about to receive a very different answer than Zethkar expected. 60 hours had passed since Zethkar's ultimatum, and the silence from Earth was starting to irritate him. Usually, primitive species responded within the first day. They would either send panicked surrender messages or launch their pitiful attacks in desperate fury. But these humans had done nothing. No communications, no military movements, no signs of mass evacuation. The reptilian ambassador paced his command deck, his claws clicking against the metal floor. His tactical officer reported the same readings as before. Primitive satellites still orbited the planet. Ancient space stations continued their slow rotations. Radio chatter carried the same mundane conversations about weather and entertainment. It was as if the humans hadn't even heard his message. Perhaps their translation systems are too primitive to understand, suggested his weapons officer, a scarred veteran of 12 campaigns. Should we demonstrate our power to get their attention? Zethkar's eyes glowed with predatory satisfaction. Of course, these backward creatures probably couldn't comprehend the scope of galactic civilization. They needed a practical lesson in the reality of their situation. He studied his tactical display, searching for an appropriate target. A small space station orbited high above Earth's northern continent. According to his scans, it was barely functional. Solar panels, primitive life support, and what appeared to be outdated research equipment. Perfect for a demonstration that would be visible from the planet's surface but wouldn't cause significant casualties. The hegemony preferred to keep useful slave populations intact. Target the orbital research facility, Zethkar commanded. Low power setting. We want to destroy it completely, but leave enough debris for them to analyze. Let them see what hegemony plasma weapons can do to their best technology. His weapons officer's hands moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency. Targeting sensors locked onto the small station. Power flowed to the plasma cannon arrays that had reduced fortified worlds to slag. The familiar hum of charging. Weapons filled the bridge. Firing, announced the weapons officer. Twin beams of superheated plasma streaked through space toward their target. Zethkar smiled as he watched the tactical display. In seconds, the primitive station would be vaporized, and the humans would finally understand what they faced. The plasma beams struck their target and simply disappeared. Zethkar blinked his reptilian eyes, certain his vision had betrayed him. The space station remained exactly where it had been, completely undamaged. His sensors showed no impact, no explosion, no debris field. It was as if his weapons had fired into empty space. Malfunction in the targeting system, he snapped. Recalibrate, and fire again. But his weapons officer was staring at his instruments with growing alarm. Sir, the weapons fired correctly. The beams reached the target, but they were absorbed by some kind of energy barrier. Impossible, Zethkar snarled. Our scans showed no defensive systems, no energy signatures consistent with shield technology. Even as he spoke, space around Earth began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The effects spread outward from the planet, revealing shapes that couldn't possibly be there. Massive structures materialized from apparent nothingness. Orbital platforms larger than small moons, shipyards that could construct vessels in the shadow of Earth's continents, and ships. Hundreds of ships that dwarfed his dreadnought like minnows beside a whale. Zethkar's command deck erupted in alarm bells as his sensors struggled to process what they were detecting. Power signatures that exceeded anything in hegemony databases. Weapon systems based on principles his scientists had never encountered. Defensive shields that made his own technology look primitive by comparison. "How?" he whispered, his forked tongue flickering in confusion. "How did they hide all of this?" A new voice filled his bridge, transmitted on frequencies his own equipment shouldn't have been able to receive. The speaker was human, female, and spoke with the calm confidence of someone who held all the advantages. "Ambassador Zethkar of the Hegemony," the voice said. "I am Admiral Lee of the Terran Defense Coalition. I believe you wanted to discuss terms of surrender." The irony wasn't lost on him, but Zethkar was too shocked to appreciate it. His mind raced through everything he thought he knew about this species. "Your technology," he managed. "Our scans showed nothing like this. You're supposed to be primitive." Admiral Lee's laugh held no humor. "We've been watching your empire for 43 years, Ambassador. Every conquest, every technology, every weakness. Did you really think a species capable of spaceflight wouldn't notice the radio chatter from 1,000 civilizations?" The truth hit Zethkar like a physical blow. While the hegemony had assumed these humans were isolated and ignorant, they had been listening to every communication in their galaxy, learning, studying, preparing. "The backward appearance of our civilization was carefully maintained," Admiral Lee continued. "Every primitive rocket launch was designed to reinforce your assumptions. Every obsolete satellite was placed to create the illusion of technological inferiority. We needed time to understand what we faced and develop appropriate responses." Zethkar looked at his tactical display with new eyes. Those primitive space stations weren't research facilities. They were weapons platforms disguised to look harmless. The obsolete satellites were advanced sensor networks. Even Earth's divided nations were probably a deception, designed to make the hegemony underestimate human unity. "While your empire conquered through brute force," Admiral Lee said, "we studied your victims. We learned from the Velnari shield, harmonics you never bothered to improve. We enhanced Korthak plasma technology beyond your understanding. We combined innovations from dozens of species into systems your scientists never imagined possible." The space around Zethkar's ship filled with human vessels, each one broadcasting power signatures that made his dreadnought seem like a child's toy. He realized with growing horror that he wasn't just outgunned. He was facing technology that had evolved beyond anything in hegemony space. "The question now," Admiral Lee said calmly, "is whether you're here to discuss your surrender, or if you'd prefer to test our defensive capabilities further." Zethkar stared at the tactical display, watching as more human ships continued to decloak around his position. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, he was the one facing an impossible choice. Admiral Lee's invitation came with a warning that chilled Zethkar to his core. "You're welcome to bring your personal weapons, Ambassador. Though I should mention that our security systems have been analyzing your equipment for the past hour. We've already developed countermeasures." The transport shuttle that docked with his dreadnought looked deceptively simple from the outside. But as Zethkar stepped aboard, he immediately noticed details that shouldn't exist. The hull materials absorbed sensor scans in ways that defied physics. The propulsion system operated on principles his engineers had never encountered. Even the artificial gravity felt different, more natural than anything hegemony science had achieved. Captain Cho greeted him at the airlock with a polite bow that somehow felt more threatening than any weapon. The human was smaller than Zethkar, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who knew he held every advantage. "Welcome aboard the Harmony, Ambassador. Admiral Lee is looking forward to our discussion." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Zethkar tried to catalog everything he saw. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with energy, as if the entire vessel was alive. Display panels showed information in languages he recognized from across the galaxy, but the data processing speed was impossible. His own ship's computers would need hours to calculate what these systems handled in seconds. "Your technology," Zethkar said, unable to hide his amazement. How did you advance so quickly? Our records show your species only achieved spaceflight 60 years ago. Captain Cho smiled. We had good teachers, Ambassador. Your empire has been very educational. They passed through a section where technicians worked on equipment that made Zethkar's head spin. Quantum processors that shouldn't be able to function in normal space. Energy conduits that carried power loads his ships couldn't generate. Weapon. Components that combined technologies from species separated by thousands of light years. Dr. Han looked up from her workstation as they approached. She was young by human standards, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had unraveled the secrets of the universe. Ambassador Zethkar, I presume. I've been studying your ship's design. Quite impressive for single-species engineering. The backhanded compliment stung. The hegemony's technology has conquered 17 star systems, Zethkar replied defensively. Yes, we know, Dr. Han said casually, turning back to her display. We've been tracking your expansion for decades. Your approach is very direct. Overwhelming force, technological superiority, divide and conquer. It works well against isolated species. She gestured to the equipment around them. But you see, Ambassador, every species you've conquered had something unique to offer. The Velnari understood quantum mechanics in ways you never explored. The Korthak had mastered energy manipulation beyond your comprehension. The Zephyrians developed materials science that could revolutionize starship construction. Zethkar felt a growing unease. Those species are extinct or enslaved. Their knowledge belongs to the hegemony now. Does it? Dr. Han asked with genuine curiosity. Because from what we've observed, your empire simply takes what it wants and discards the rest. You never learned to improve on what you stole. You never combined different approaches to create something new. Captain Cho resumed walking, leading them through sections that showcased humanity's impossible achievements. We took a different approach, Ambassador. When we discovered galactic civilization, we didn't announce ourselves, we watched, we learned. We found ways to contact the species you'd conquered and offered them something your empire never did. Which was? Zethkar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Hope, Captain Cho said simply. And partnership. They entered a command center that took Zethkar's breath away. Holographic displays showed real-time information from across the galaxy. Human operators worked alongside beings from dozens of different species, their various anatomies accommodated by adaptive workstations. The cooperation was seamless, natural, as if they'd been working together for centuries. This is what your empire never understood, Dr. Han explained, joining them in the command center. Every species has unique strengths. Your people are excellent at energy weapons and faster than light travel. The Velnari see quantum possibilities we couldn't imagine. The Korthak manipulate matter at the molecular level. When you combine these strengths instead of suppressing them, you get something greater than the sum of its parts. Admiral Lee appeared on the main display, her image transmitted from Earth's command center. Ambassador, what you're seeing is the result of true cooperation. Not conquest, not submission, but partnership between equals. Every species contributes what they do best, and everyone benefits from the advances. Zethkar studied the command center with growing alarm. These weren't just human innovations. This was a coalition of species working together, sharing knowledge freely, building on each other's strengths. It was everything the hegemony's rigid hierarchy prevented. Your social structure is impossible, he protested. Different species cannot work as equals. There must be hierarchy, order, control. Captain Cho laughed. Ambassador, you're looking at living proof that you're wrong. Our primitive social structure is actually our greatest strength. We don't hoard knowledge or suppress innovation. When a breakthrough happens in one laboratory, it's shared with everyone within hours. When one nation develops a new technology, all nations benefit. Dr. Han pulled up a display showing Earth's defense network. Every human nation contributed to our planetary defense system. The Russians provided material science. The Americans shared propulsion technology. The Chinese developed quantum computing advances. The Koreans created the integration protocols that made it all work together. But more than that, Admiral Lee's voice continued from the speakers. Every human citizen understands that they're part of something larger. Our soldiers aren't just military personnel. They're farmers, teachers, engineers, doctors. When threatened, our entire population becomes a defensive force. Zethkar felt panic rising in his chest. This wasn't just technological superiority. This was a fundamental difference in how their societies functioned. The hegemony ruled through fear and domination. These humans had built something based on cooperation and shared purpose. He activated his personal communicator, desperate to contact his fleet and warn them of what he'd discovered. But only static filled the channel. He tried different frequencies, emergency codes, even the quantum entanglement communicators that should work across any distance. Nothing. Lieutenant Park appeared at his shoulder, having approached silently. "I'm sorry, Ambassador, but all communication beyond this solar system has been temporarily suspended. Our quantum jammers are quite effective, I'm afraid." "You've cut me off. From my fleet?" Zethkar snarled. "We've been intercepting hegemony communications for 47 years, Lieutenant Park replied calmly. "We know your language, your codes, your fleet movements. We know where your ships are positioned and what their orders are. Right now, they're waiting for your status report, wondering why you haven't called for backup." The full scope of humanity's deception crashed over Zethkar like a tidal wave. They hadn't just hidden their technology. They had been actively spying on his empire for decades, learning everything while revealing nothing. He was trapped in a solar system with beings who had turned espionage into an art form, surrounded by technology that made his own weapons look like stone tools. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrifying thought began to form. If humans could do all this, while hiding on one small planet, what could they accomplish when they decided to stop hiding? The full horror of his situation hit Zethkar when Admiral Lee activated the solar system's tactical display. What he had assumed was empty space suddenly came alive with contact signatures. Ships emerged from asteroid belts where his sensors had detected only rock and ice. Hidden bases revealed themselves on moons he had dismissed as barren. Even the space around Jupiter's gas giant atmosphere shimmered as massive installations decloaked. 43 years of construction, Admiral Lee said quietly. Every asteroid mined and converted. Every moon turned into a fortress. Every piece of space debris carefully positioned to hide our true capabilities. Zethkar stared at the display in growing terror. The Sol system wasn't just defended. It was a weapon pointed at the heart of galactic civilization. Hundreds of ships that dwarfed anything in hegemony space. Orbital platforms that could probably crack planets. Manufacturing facilities that could build fleets faster than his empire could deploy them. General Kim's engineering corps worked around the clock for decades to build what you're seeing, Captain Cho explained. We had to be completely self-sufficient. Every component manufactured in system. Every worker trained from birth to maintain absolute secrecy. The tactical display zoomed in on individual installations. Zethkar saw shipyards hidden in the shadow of Saturn's rings, their output matching the production of entire hegemony worlds. Mining operations on distant moons that had been extracting resources for longer than some civilizations had existed. Construction projects that spanned multiple planets, all coordinated through quantum communication networks his empire couldn't detect. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No single species could accomplish this in such a short time." "You're right," Admiral Lee agreed. "No single species could, but we weren't alone." The display shifted to show recordings that made Zethkar's blood run cold. Hegemony ships being captured intact, their crews unharmed but clearly prisoners. Tribute fleets that had simply vanished while traveling between conquered worlds. Military vessels that had reported routine patrols and never returned. 12 hegemony fleets over the past 15 years, Dr. Han reported from her analysis station. Each one carefully selected for maximum intelligence value while maintaining plausible deniability. Pirates, navigation errors, equipment failures. Your own reports blamed everything except the truth. Admiral Lee's expression remained calm, but her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Commander Lim's deep space operations have been active throughout hegemony territory for over 2 decades. Every disappeared ship provided us with current technology, tactical data, and detailed intelligence about your military capabilities. New set of recordings began playing. Zethkar watched in horror as human operatives moved through hegemony space stations, their disguises perfect, their access credentials apparently legitimate. They walked through secure facilities as if they belonged there, recording everything, copying databases and establishing contact with species that had been conquered generations ago. The Velnari still remember their homeworld before your empire turned it into a slave colony, Commander Lim's voice narrated over the footage. The Korthak never stopped dreaming of freedom. The Zephyrians have been secretly maintaining their cultural identity despite your attempts to erase it. The recordings showed clandestine meetings in forgotten corners of space stations, human agents sharing technology with oppressed species, weapons being distributed, communication networks being established, hope being planted in places where the hegemony thought it had been extinguished forever. Every species you conquered had something to offer our alliance, Admiral Lee explained. Not just their technology, but their knowledge of hegemony operations, guard rotations, supply routes, command structures. Your own victims became our intelligence network. Zethkar felt his world crumbling around him. How many species have joined your rebellion? Rebellion? Dr. Hahn laughed. Ambassador, you're thinking too small. This isn't a rebellion. This is a liberation movement that spans 47 star systems. The tactical display expanded beyond the Sol system, showing hegemony space in real time. Red indicators marked normal Imperial operations, but scattered throughout the display were blue signatures that shouldn't exist. Human ships positioned near critical installations. Allied forces moving through space lanes the hegemony thought were secure. We're offering you a choice, Ambassador, Admiral Lee said. Join us in creating a galaxy where different species cooperate as equals, or watch as we systematically dismantle the empire you've served your entire life. Zethkar's pride flared. You cannot threaten the hegemony. We have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, weapons that can sterilize worlds. We know, Captain Cho said calmly. We've counted them. The display showed detailed intelligence reports on every major hegemony fleet. Ship counts, weapon specifications, crew rotations, supply requirements, information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. Your third fleet is currently protecting the Rigel colonies, Lieutenant Park read from his datapad. 47 ships, mostly older designs, with a critical shortage of quantum torpedo ammunition. Your seventh fleet is on patrol near the Galactic Rim, but 3 of their capital ships are operating with damaged shield generators they haven't been able to repair. The litany continued. Every hegemony military asset cataloged with devastating precision. Every weakness identified and documented. Every strength countered by specific human capabilities. This is why we're confident in our timeline, Admiral Lee said. We know exactly what we're facing and we've prepared accordingly. As if to prove her point, the display suddenly showed live footage from across the galaxy. Human fleets dropping out of hyperspace near hegemony installations. Not attacking, but simply appearing. Their presence unmistakable. Zethkar watched in stunned silence as his empire's outer territories were suddenly bracketed by forces that shouldn't exist. Communication arrays went offline as human jamming. Systems activated. Supply convoys found their routes blocked by ships that appeared from nowhere. Border stations reported intruders who seemed to know their security codes. 12 star systems simultaneously, Admiral Lee announced. Each operation timed to begin at the exact moment you're seeing this footage. Your empire's expansion has stopped, Ambassador. The question now is whether it will contract peacefully or violently. The recordings showed hegemony soldiers surrendering, without firing a shot, overwhelmed by forces they couldn't understand. Conquered species rising up as human weapons and intelligence reached them. Supply lines collapsing as carefully placed strikes disrupted logistics networks. Your empire expanded through fear and overwhelming force, Dr. Hahn observed. But fear only works when your victims believe resistance is hopeless. We've given them hope, weapons, and most importantly, proof that the hegemony can be defeated. Zethkar stared at the tactical display, watching decades of Imperial expansion unravel in real time. Everything he had believed about hegemony superiority was crumbling before his eyes. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally. Admiral Lee's smile held no triumph, only sad determination. "Help us end this peacefully, Ambassador. You know your Empire's capabilities better than anyone. Help us convince them that cooperation serves everyone better than conquest." The choice hanging before Zethkar was simple in its implications but staggering in its scope. Betray everything he had believed in, or watch as these impossible humans systematically destroyed the only civilization he had ever known. The ancient Hegemony Council chamber had witnessed the fall of countless civilizations over 3,000 years. Its towering walls bore the carved names of conquered worlds, each one a testament to imperial might. But as Zethkar walked through its massive doors, wearing armor that gleamed with technologies the Council had never seen, everything felt different. The reptilian ambassador who had once brought news of easy conquests now carried credentials from something called the Galactic Liberation Alliance. His new armor incorporated defensive systems that made hegemony personal shields look primitive. Energy patterns flowed across its surface in ways that suggested materials, science beyond imperial understanding. The 12 council members sat in their traditional circle, their ancient forms draped in robes of conquest. High Chancellor Vexmore, oldest of them all, leaned forward with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of star nations. "Zethkar," his voice echoed through the chamber, "you have been missing for 6 months. Where is your report on the primitive world designated Earth?" Zethkar stood in the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. These beings had ruled the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force for longer than most species had existed. They had never known defeat, never experienced doubt, never faced an enemy that could match their power. "Honored Council," he began, his voice carrying across the vast space, "I bring greetings from Admiral Lee of the Terran Defense Coalition and formal credentials as ambassador from the Galactic Liberation Alliance." The silence that followed was absolute. Then High Chancellor Vexmore's laughter filled the chamber, joined by the other council members. The sound was bitter and mocking, the reaction of beings who had heard similar jokes from 1,000 conquered species. "Ambassador?" Council member Zarthek wheezed between laughs. "From primitives who barely achieved spaceflight? Have you lost your mind during your absence?" Zethkar activated the holographic projector built into his armor. The chamber filled with three-dimensional displays that showed the current state of hegemony space. What the projections revealed made the laughter die in their throats. Red zones marked territories that were no longer responding to Imperial commands. Blue signatures showed human fleets positioned throughout what had once been secure hegemony space. Yellow indicators marked systems where conquered species had openly rebelled, supported by weapons and technology they shouldn't possess. In the past 6 months, Zethkar announced, 47 star systems have declared independence from hegemony rule. Each declaration was backed by human military support and coordinated through a rebellion network that spans the entire galaxy. High Chancellor Vexmore studied the tactical display with growing alarm. "Impossible. Our forces would have crushed any uprising." "Your forces tried," Zethkar replied calmly. "Fleet Admiral Song's armada is currently holding position around our 3 capital worlds. Her ships incorporate technology from every species the hegemony has conquered, improved and integrated in ways our scientists never imagined." The holographic display zoomed in on the hegemony homeworld. Massive human vessels surrounded the planet, their designs incorporating elements that the Council recognized from dozens of different species. Velnari quantum shields protected hulls built with Korthak materials, science. Zephyrian sensor arrays, guided weapons based on improved hegemony plasma technology. "How?" Council member Darnex whispered. "How did primitives acquire such capabilities?" "They were never primitive," Zethkar explained. "Everything we observed was carefully orchestrated deception. While we assumed they were isolated and backward, they were listening to every communication in our space, learning our language, studying our technology, and making contact with every species we had conquered." Captain Yoon's diplomatic corps appeared on additional displays, showing coordination between human forces and rebel groups across the galaxy. The scope of the operation was staggering. Simultaneous uprisings on dozens of worlds, each one perfectly timed and supplied with weapons that matched or exceeded hegemony standards. The humans offered something we never did. Zethkar continued. Hope, partnership, the promise that different species could work together as equals rather than rulers and slaves. High Chancellor Vexmore's expression shifted from disbelief to fury. We will not be dictated to by inferior species. Order the battle fleets to converge on the human homeworld. We will show them the price of defying hegemony rule. With what? Fleets? Zethkar asked quietly. The tactical display updated to show current hegemony military positions. Nearly half their forces were trapped in systems where human interdiction prevented faster-than-light travel. Others were surrounded by superior numbers and firepower. The remaining ships were scattered across the galaxy, trying to maintain control over territories that were slipping away hour by hour. Your 7th Fleet surrendered yesterday rather than engage human forces over the Centauri colonies, Zethkar reported. Admiral Kexitar transmitted that his crews refused to fire on beings who were offering freedom to conquered populations. Council chamber erupted in shocked voices. Hegemony military units didn't surrender. They fought to the death rather than accept defeat. The idea that their own soldiers would lay down arms was unthinkable. The humans understand something we never learned, Zethkar said, his voice cutting through the chaos. True strength doesn't come from forcing others to submit. It comes from inspiring them to work together toward a common goal. He gestured to the displays showing human-led coalitions throughout the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for generations were cooperating under human guidance. Technologies were being shared freely. Resources flowed to where they were needed, most rather, than being hoarded by the powerful. They're offering the hegemony a choice, Zethkar announced. Dissolve the empire voluntarily, grant independence to all conquered worlds, and submit to tribunals for war crimes. In exchange, hegemony worlds will be welcomed as equals in the new galactic community. High Chancellor Vexmore's roar of rage echoed through the chamber. We are the hegemony. We have ruled this galaxy for 3 millennia. We will not bow to upstart primitives. The alternative, Zethkar continued calmly, is total war against a coalition that now includes every species you have ever conquered, equipped with technology that makes our weapons obsolete, and led by beings who have turned warfare into a science we never understood. The displays showed human battle fleets moving into position around remaining hegemony strongholds. Their movements were coordinated with mathematical precision, cutting off supply lines and isolating Imperial forces. More disturbing were the reports of hegemony units switching sides as human negotiators offered them something their empire never had: a future where they could serve ideals rather than just power. As Zethkar watched the council struggle to comprehend their new reality, he reflected on the irony that had brought him to this moment. He had arrived at Earth expecting to conquer the galaxy's weakest species. Instead, he had discovered beings whose greatest strength was their ability to see potential in others and inspire them to achieve things they never thought possible. The galaxy was indeed trembling, but not with fear of hegemony might. It trembled with the hope that a better future was finally within reach, led by humans who had proven that cooperation could triumph over conquest. The age of empire was ending. The age of liberation had begun.